Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Succinct Psychology, aka Succinct. My name is Jaia Hendrickson, and today I'm going to be picking up where I left off in my last video, covering Chapter 4 in Principles of Social Psychology, right here at the feeling self, so self-esteem. Self-esteem refers to the positive and negative feelings that we have about ourselves. We experience the positive feelings of high self-esteem when we believe that we're good and worthy and that we're viewed positively by others. We experience the negative feelings of low self-esteem when we believe that we're inadequate and that we're less worthy than others. Self-esteem can be measured using both explicit and implicit measures. And both approaches find that people tend to view themselves positively. One common self-report measure of self-esteem is the Rosenberg self-esteem scale. And higher numbers on the scale indicate a higher self-esteem. And the average score for college students who complete the scale is about a 3 on a 1 to 4 scale, demonstrating that, by and large, people do have high self-esteem. More indirect measures of self-esteem have also been created, measures that may provide a more accurate picture of the self-concept because they're less influenced by the desire to make a positive impression. For example, Anthony Greenwald and Shelley Farnham used the implicit association test to study the self-concept indirectly. In their study, participants worked at a computer and they were presented with a series of words, and each of which they were to categorize in one of two ways. One categorization decision involved determining whether the word related to the self, so me, myself, mine, or to another person, so other, they, them, and a second categorization decision involved determining whether the word was pleasant, so joy, smile, happiness, or unpleasant, so pain, death, tragedy. And on some of the trials, the self words, so me, myself, mine, were paired with pleasant items. And the other words, so they, them, their, were paired with the unpleasant items. And on other trials, the self words were paired with unpleasant items and the other words were paired with pleasant items. And what Greenwald and Farnham found was that on average, participants were significantly faster at categorizing positive words when they were paired with the self than they were at categorizing negative words that were paired with the self. And so this also suggested again that people do have positive self-esteem overall. And another approach to assessing self-esteem indirectly is measuring a concept known as implicit egoism. In this research, they found that people prefer things that are associated with their own names to things that are not associated with their own names. More specifically, people prefer their own initials to the initials of other people, and they prefer other people who share their initials than people who don't. Although self-esteem comes in part from our own personal accomplishments, it's also influenced by the social situation. Positive self-esteem occurs not only when we do well in our own eyes, but also when we feel like we're positively perceived by others that we care about. Social status refers to the extent to which we're viewed positively and are esteemed by others. Because it's so important to be viewed as a productive and competent member of society, people naturally attempt to present themselves as positively as they can. And the tendency to present a positive self-image of oneself with the goal of increasing your social status is known as self-presentation. And we use self-presentation to try to convince others that we're good and worthy people. And when we're successful at our self-presentation and people view us positively, we increase our social status. And when we perceive that we have high social status, we experience positive self-esteem. Now, some people are naturally better at self-presentation. They enjoy doing it and they're good at it. Whereas some people find self-presentation less desirable and more difficult. An important individual difference variable known as self-monitoring has been shown in hundreds of studies to have an important and major impact on self-presentation. Self-monitoring refers to the tendency to be both motivated and capable of regulating our behavior to meet the demands of social situations. High self-monitors are particularly good at reading the emotions of others, and therefore they're better at fitting into social situations. High self-monitors agree with statements such as, in different situations and with different people, I often act like very different persons. And I guess I put on a show to impress or entertain people. Low self-monitors, on the other hand, generally act on their own attitudes, even when the social situation suggests that they should behave otherwise. Low self-monitors are likely to agree with statements such as, at parties and social gatherings, I do not attempt to do or say things that others will like, and I can only argue for ideas that I already believe in. So in short, high self-monitors try to get other people to like them by behaving in ways that others find desirable, whereas low self-monitors do not. In one experiment that showed the importance of self-monitoring, Chang and Chartrand had college students interact individually with another student whom they believed that they would be working with on an upcoming task. Now, the student that they were actually interacting with was actually an experimental Confederate. And a Confederate is essentially someone who pretends to be a participant in a study for some purpose of the study. So it's a form of deception that they use. And so while they were interacting, the Confederate subtly touched her own face several times. And the researcher measured the extent to which the student participant mimicked the Confederate by also touching his or her own face. And so the situational variable was the status of the Confederate. Before the meeting began, and according to through the use of random assignment, the students were told that they would either be leading the next task or that they would be the worker in the next task, or vice versa. And the person variable was self-monitoring, and each participant was classified as either high or low in self-monitoring, depending on their responses to the self-monitoring scale. And as you can see from figure 4.6 here, Chang and Chartrand found an interaction effect. The students who had been classified as high self-monitors were more likely to mimic the behavior of the Confederate when she was described as the leader versus when she was described as the worker. And this indicated that they were tuned into the social situation and they modified their behavior to be viewed more positively. And although the low self-monitors did mimic the other person, they did mimic them more when they were high versus low, so leader versus follower. And this finding is quite consistent with the idea that high self-monitors are particularly aware of the other person's status, and they attempt to self-present more positively to the high-status leader. The low self-monitors, on the other hand, because they feel less of a need to impress overall, they didn't pay much attention to the person's status. Now, when we promote ourselves too much, although it may feel good in the short term, in the long term, the outcomes for the self may not be that positive. The goal of creating and maintaining a positive self-esteem has to be moderated by the cognitive goal of having an accurate self-view. Even though we may prefer to hold highly favorable views of ourselves, more accurate views would be almost certainly more useful because accurate information is likely to lead to better decision making. And research has suggested that people not only self-enhance, but they also desire to be known for who they believe that they are, even if what they are is not all good. And when people enter into relationships with others who verify their self-views, for example, they feel more intimate with the other person and they're more satisfied with those interactions than they are with partners who are positive towards them all the time. And the desire for self-verifying feedback is so powerful that people who have negative self-views may in some cases work to verify those negative views by avoiding positive feedback in favor of negative but self-verifying feedback. Alright folks, I'm going to end the video here before we get into the next section on chapter 4, but I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you guys next time.